All right, we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of H2O. My name is Mr. Strada, and I got my co-partner, Mr.
Brundell. Hello. How are you, my friend? It's
Mario,
been
man. It's been
a
a while.
while.
It's been a while. Miss you, man. It's been, 3-4 weeks since we haven't spoken. I know the market's kind of crazy right now. People say it's slowing down. I'm not sure what part is slowing down, but what I do know is that our industry still keeps being interesting day by day.
Absolutely. It's been changing a lot,
Absolutely.
and with that, a lot of I always feel like a lot of opportunities. I'm always, a steady market, I feel like it's never good for anyone. But if
Yep.
a changing market, and even if the changes are not particularly always good, I always feel like a changing market is healthier for the overall, industry,
Well, when it comes to changes, a ton happening every day. So it's been unpredictable, somewhat like the markets.
Yes.
So, all right. So let's start with quick topics here. Let's start with ocean freight rates. You obviously know I love my ocean freight rates. It's something that I based this channel on. So
Yes.
let me kind of give you a bit. What are you seeing? What are you seeing on your rate side? I mean, are you seeing a
So
little bit of
freight
coming down?
rates in the last 4 weeks, and I don't have the exact percentages to back me up on this, but I want to say they probably have calmed down 30 to 40%. Especially China is still very, very cheap. I mean, I've seen some spot rates below 4, which we haven't seen in years. I still think that the moving average is probably $5,000 to $7,000, somewhere like that. That would be probably my range that I give. And then specific ports, you might get like a little nugget where it's you get something a little bit cheaper.
Well, it seems that you see a lot of this cargo shifting from East Coast. I read a report real quick that the West Coast, it's actually not having very many vessels waiting. They're actually being received very quickly. You don't have a big backlog, but again, it's your backyard. You would know. We don't know if it's true or not, but I've seen that there's been a little bit better flows through that area. But I'm also seeing a lot more.
I think overall, I think we've seen pretty good flows in the ports, especially here on the West Coast. I think that the crazy times are somewhat over. Volume was still pretty high, and yes, it's not perfect. But I had a lot of phone calls from trucking companies reaching out to me and asking me for business. Which I haven't had that in 2.5 years. So that someone actually reaches out to us and saying, "Hey, we would like to do more business with you guys." It's unique, and it shows me that the market has changed a little bit on that front.
But I also think that what's also changed is some of the laxed regulations for COVID in China when it comes to lockdowns. They've been a little bit more lax. So it's not like one case, let's shut the entire port. I think they're starting to ramp up again. So I personally think it's still going to be, it's kind of the calm before the storm. I still think I see a big influx of containers coming in. It's just a question of what ports are coming in. But back to your point in respect to the rates. So Shenzhen to LA, it's about 41.60 for a 40-foot containers are averaging about 54.70. Shenzhen to Norfolk, Savannah, New York, those ports, it's about 7,010 for a 20. And for a 40, it's about 9,200. Obviously, these are just roundabouts. So if you're in that area, you're doing well. Shenzhen to Vancouver is about 41.60. For a 40, it's 54.70. And Shenzhen to Toronto or Montreal, which seems a little bit more expensive, is about 8,500 for a 20, and go figure, only about less than $900 for a 40. So, I mean, I do see the rates have come down substantially, but how long is this really going to last, Mario? I don't know. I'm reading a lot of different things, steamship lines like Maersk, they're trying to think that, hey, we're going to keep bumping up rates. I mean, is this something that you really see happening long-term, or is this just something to kind of like fill what they have? Because I've also seen a ton of blank sailings. I don't know if you're
right,
but a ton of blank sailings.
Well, generally speaking, I think the blank sailing shows you that I think we're actually getting back to normal.
Yeah.
Because 2 years ago we had very little to no blank sailings, right?
Yep.
Because obviously freight rates were so high. I still believe that the freight market is gonna continue to slowly go down, in my opinion. And I think, but I do think we're pretty close to the bottom.
Yeah.
So I don't expect our freight rates going back to $1,500 like we were pre-COVID.
No way.
I don't foresee that happening anytime soon. I think 3 to 4,000. I think it's a healthy freight rate to the West Coast. I think 4 to 6 is a healthy one to the East Coast. I think if we end up there, I think all the shippers should be happy and all the freight forwarders should be happy.
I agree.
And,
I
and
agree.
and generally speaking, a freight forwarder does well in a moving market. So if it goes down or it goes up, where freight forwarders, generally speaking, don't do so well if in the market is very sturdy. Because everybody knows what the freight rates are. So if you're a freight forwarder, be happy that there's movement in the market because it might improve your profit margin.
Well, I mean, it also helps a lot of these importers that are coming in where they're not spending a year's worth of, a transportation or logistics budget and blow it on just 1 or 2 containers. They're actually going to be able to. That's why I think volumes will continue to go up. But again, I'm optimistic, which also now brings me to another topic that's really important when it comes to it: domestic trucking. I'm reading all these different things about domestic trucking. I don't think people understand there are so many different areas of domestic trucking. You have your LTL carriers, you have your full load carriers, you have your drayage carriers. I mean, so when you see some of these, or when I read some of these posts from some of these outrageous outlets, I won't mention any names, that the trucking rates are going down and that, we're not seeing the volumes, warehouses are getting empty. You mentioned that trucking companies are reaching out to you moving. And I see the same thing. I do have some of the, some of my partners reaching out, asking for freight. I mean, what are you seeing in the domestic market? I mean, where do you see the most pain and where do you see the most traction?
So I think that, like you said, most people think about drayage or think about trucking, but there is like 7 or 8 different forms of trucking, which is pretty crazy, and I just read a few, and also I'm not going to mention any names here, but I read a few annual reports, especially Q1 and Q2, from large domestic trucking companies. And what's incredible to me was, how focused they are on trucking. But that's also is changing a little bit. And because of that, I've seen trucking companies, especially the large ones, making a lot of acquisitions. And especially acquisitions in terms of international as well as cross-border. So what that shows me is that the big trucking company think that winter is coming, so to speak. The crazy times are over, and that they're now looking at it saying, "Hey, we need to find something that's a little bit more. We need to be more diversified rather than just focusing on a trucking."
Right.
And so I had a lot of conversations over the last 3-4 weeks with fairly large trucking companies that saying, "Hey, we might thinking about entering into international. We might want to open up new trucking routes going into Mexico and Canada, and stuff like that." So I think that's interesting that a lot of these trucking companies are now looking further than the borders, because I think the last 2.5 years, everybody was just so focused on retaining drivers and keeping up with the volume. But I think this is changing. Also, I think the same thing is happening on the warehousing side. You see that warehouses are very, very full right now. So that's normally an indication for me is that if warehouses are full, that probably means that there's less people moving freight because it's all going in internationally, but it's not moving to the final customer. And I think that's true in many instances, which kind of scares me in terms of how the economy is doing.
Yeah. I mean, we're a pretty big tell tag when it comes to it. I personally think logistics is always really the first ones to really see what's going to happen in the market. When it comes to acquisitions, I'm starting to see larger scale companies with acquisitions. I know I have a couple of my colleagues that completely go against what I say when it comes to certain acquisitions, but I am seeing that some of these ocean carriers, no names mentioned, are looking at the larger brokerage firms. And more, you're starting to see that full round of logistics. But now that also brings me to like employment, right? We've had this huge push on bringing people into our industry and trying to fill all these positions. And keep in mind, what the compensation packages that they're getting are incredible. But now that the volumes are going down, I'm starting to notice that people are starting to get stressed. And I hate to say this, but like after the Fed spoke, I think that the larger ones, I'm not so worried about the smaller ones, I think their overheads are going to be too much. I think you're going to start seeing a lot of movement again happening. Now I could be wrong, but I mean this is what I'm reading within the LinkedIn and some of the Wall Street Journal, some other outlets, that employment is going to be an issue because these companies that have now overly committed just don't have the volumes that they used to have.
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right, Mitch. I think that everybody over the last 2.5 years have been so brainwashed that things are just going to keep growing and keep doubling and keep doubling and keep doubling. And I think now they're looking at Q1 and Q2 and saying, whoa, what's happening here? Why are we not having the same growth numbers? And it's even for us. I mean, we are still up about 40% year to date, but we doubled last year, right? So in theory, we have 60% less growth year to date. Which certainly we kind of saw the writing on the wall, and we made sure that we kind of stopped hiring as aggressively as we did the past 2 years. Past 2 years, if I knew someone that I worked with in the past, I would say, yes, I would love to have you.
Right.
Where now I'm becoming a little bit more calculated with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been so much money that's been thrown into the industry. There's a lot of VC companies. I'm sure you're seeing on LinkedIn, a little bit in the reds because they just over anticipated, and they didn't really think about the repercussions. Now, don't get me wrong, there is still a huge shortage in our industry for people. But I just think that the aggressiveness with compensation packages are just going to start coming down back to normal. But that also creates a lot of movement. The forwarding industry, there's a ton of movement. So it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, everyone that's kind of been watching our channel, I hope you have been prepared. I do know we get quite a bit of feedback that they enjoy hearing some of the stuff because no holds bar is kind of a good way of approach. But it's definitely something crazy. But again, the domestic industry, I'm seeing more and more. And what I've noticed is a lot of these trucking companies also started to expand into other domestic markets and doing, different types of services. And I think they're starting to now back up because the volume. So, if you have your relationship with your carriers, make sure you have really solid, relationships and you keep them well and keep informed, because I'm telling you, I do believe there's going to be a big influx of containers coming in. Again, that's just, that's me. But to wrap things up, are you seeing that the warehouse, the cargo, I know you mentioned it, and I just want to touch base one more time. Are you seeing that the warehouses are now starting to have less freight? Is that what you were understanding? I mean, they're starting to empty out the warehouses because, it depends on what side of the country you're on. I think there's more capacity than others.
Yes.
And I'm seeing that a lot of it's shifting, and the carriers are getting shiftier. Moving things around. I mean, do you see, if you had to give me 3 markets that you see your largest challenges in when it comes to warehousing, what would those be?
Yeah, so I think overall the lack of large partners that have availability, good warehouses that have availability is really, really hard to find right now. The lack of, and especially in my case, the lack of finding warehouses that are willing to do exports, not only imports. I mean, we had a lot of partner warehouses that simply told us saying, hey, we're not interested in handling your export shipments. But if it's an import, or if we can mix and match the containers, especially in the New York area, we're more than happy to do it for you. So I think the New York port is still pretty bad. At least about 3-4 weeks ago it was when I had a conversation with a few friends, and then last but not least, I think that it's really, really challenging to find people that have a really healthy mix of import and exports, and I think the warehouses are full. And because of their being so full, I think they're less interested in taking on more business because they're worried every time they take on a new business that the product will sit for quite a long time. And I think, as we both know, warehouses don't really make money on products sitting on the warehousing floors. They're really making money on the handling on the in and outs. you know. So, and I think that's just why all the warehouses I deal with, the very first question they always ask me, "Hey Mario, how long is this going to sit?" You know. So,
yeah, that seems to be the common denominator when it comes to, when we talk to our clients. We've always asked them the same thing. How long is this going to be sitting? A lot of these people don't understand that, they want them out of their plant, but they also want to give their problems to someone else at practically no cost.
Well, but I think what's happening is that in many cases they don't know and they don't understand. Like, I think the shippers themselves don't know, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so many uncertainty. It's not like they're bringing product in and the product hasn't been sold, So they're bringing this product in and basically asking, trying to sell it, right? So they have no idea how long it's going to sit.
Yeah, these are all amazing topics. And I'll tell you something. I know we like to keep our videos nice and short within 15 minutes, but as always, Mario, these are things that I'm seeing more and more manufacturers are starting to tune into our station, getting a lot more feedback. So that's been a great sign. Again, we do appreciate all the support that we're getting from our current clients, as well, especially new opportunities. It's been amazing. So let's not wait 3 more weeks or 4 more weeks to meet up. Let's try to get it back on to next week. There's a couple of topics I'd really like to touch on. Technology is one that's really important. There's a lot of things going on in technology. I know this is a subject that someone, I've gotten a lot of messages on with respect to crypto, thinking I'm absolutely insane and that all the stuff I did was complete nonsense. And this is a direct, if you look at that market, it's a direct crash. But I think that if we start to revisit some of these and talk about what's really going on and how it affects logistics, I think we're going to see some different things. So again, Mario, I love this conversation. I like keeping them short. Looking forward to next week and talking about some of these other major topics.
Yeah, me too, man. Looking forward to it.
As always, Mario, thank you so much.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Be well. Bye-bye.